Bryce Young benched 2 weeks into his second season, 18 games into the former first-round pick's career. Covering that with us is Julian from Locked On Panthers, who already posted his instant reaction to this news here on Monday afternoon. Let's dive a little deeper, Julian. I guess just go off the surface, though, and off the top. What was your reaction around 2 o'clock this afternoon when this broke?
I was surprised, Nick. We talked about this on Sunday night. I did not believe the Carolina Panthers hired Dave Canales, hired Dan Morgan, brought in new pieces on the offensive line, traded for Deontay Johnson, traded up for Xavier Legette, just to move on from Bryce Young after 2 games into the season. I did not expect this to be what happened. Now, if you look at how he played, it's been justified. What's held back this offense through the first 2 weeks of the season has been Bryce Young's play. We saw the frustration from Adam Thielen on Sunday. He said that was not directed towards Bryce, but you got to imagine he's frustrated with how the quarterback was playing and how he was not seeing him wide open in particular on that play. So I was surprised by this move, but when you look at how he played, it really shouldn't be that surprising.
Well, Dave Canales said Sunday afternoon after the game, 26-3 loss to the Chargers, Bryce Young's our quarterback. Offered another opportunity. Bryce Young is our quarterback. Less than 24 hours later, Bryce Young is not his quarterback. He says it's because he watched the film. Why do you think he made that decision?
Yeah, it's interesting, and that's part of why I was surprised, because I felt like Dave Canales was brought in here to fix Bryce Young. And after 2 weeks and him saying Bryce Young is our quarterback, not once but twice, as you mentioned, I would not expect the next day after sleeping on it, watching the film, that Dave Canales would come to another conclusion unless there were other parties that were involved. And I am inclined to believe that the owner, David Tepper, who was the one leading the charge of the Panthers to get up to number 1 and the one who wanted Bryce Young in the first place, had to have had some conversation with Dave Canales in between Canales saying twice that Bryce Young is our quarterback and then finding out at 2 o'clock via Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network and all the other reporters, and then finding out 2:30 that Bryce Young was no longer the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. I have a hard time thinking that he just went back, saw the film, and said, he's not our guy. And oftentimes we do hear coaches say they don't want to answer any questions until they watch the film the next day. I just, based off of everything that we know about the ownership here in Carolina, it's hard for me to believe that Dave Canales had the autonomy to make this decision by himself after watching the film.
Well, let me throw this out at you. I already did on text, and you replied very quickly and emphatically. We know Bryce Young was a polarizing pick, right? We know not everybody with an offensive mind in the NFL, higher-ups, coaches, were like, oh, yeah, he can do that in the NFL. Is there any reason to think that Dave Canales came in here because he wanted an NFL head coaching job and said, okay, this is my quarterback. I fixed this. I have a decent offense, and I've proven that. Here's the problem, and is now asserting himself as the head coach of this franchise, hopefully for a long time in his mind, and saying, yeah, we're moving on?
It would be nice to believe that that's the case, but I have a hard time believing that's the case because David Tepper is the owner, and we've seen how heavy-handed David Tepper has been when it comes to his coaches, the quarterbacks here in Carolina. So it would be nice to believe, and it's possible, certainly, that Dave Canales has seen enough from Bryce Young. I have a hard time understanding why he would take this job in the first place if he had any inkling that after 2 weeks into the season that he would have to move on from Bryce. And he says it's only for this week, but then when he was asked, what about next week? What about the future? He was unwilling to answer any of those questions, which I found to be odd, and possibly it's a decision he didn't want to have to make at all. And I'm sure he didn't want to make the decision, but it may not have been his decision to make as far as Bryce Young no longer be the Carolina Panthers quarterback. We'll see. This is what some have called a big boy move for Dave Canales to go to Andy Dalton. I personally don't think it changes much for the Panthers moving forward. The defense has been atrocious through 2 weeks. J.C. Horn said it himself in the locker room after the game. In the NFL, if you can't stop the run, you can't stop anything at all. And through 2 weeks of the season, what has led you to believe this Panthers defense is going to stop the run or anything at all? Offensively, the offensive line's held up. They probably should be better with Andy Dalton. I just don't think that necessarily they're going to lead them to winning more games and going to be a playoff team. I still don't think it's a playoff team this season. And at the end of the day, they're right back to square one. They went out there, brought Bryce Young in. It looks like it did not work out, and I feel like they're probably done with him at this point in time. They're now trying to find a quarterback again. Andy Dalton's not the answer, so bringing him in, it may, I guess, galvanize the locker room for now, and it'll make fans feel good about themselves for a day. But once we get to Sunday, it's going to be the exact same Carolina Panthers football we've seen, and that's going to be a losing football team.
Julian, if this were any other position, tight end, A guy gets demoted. Well, yeah, he's the backup tight end now, and he'll go in if he needs to. But Dave Canales says Bryce Young is the number 2 quarterback. There's a lot more layers when you're a franchise, or potential franchise and number 1 overall pick and starting quarterback who's been demoted. What scenarios could play out Sunday in Las Vegas, and are any of them good for Bryce Young in this franchise?
Well, if Dalton gets injured, Bryce is in there. And I think I brought this up to you, and I brought it up at least on the podcast. I've been comparing this situation to the 1-2 years ago in New York with Zach Wilson. When the Jets benched Zach Wilson in favor of Mike White, they made Zach Wilson the 3rd-string quarterback. Now, the Panthers right now don't have a viable option outside of Young to be that 2nd-string quarterback. No offense to Jack Plummer, the rookie quarterback out of Louisville. They would have to bring somebody else in order for Bryce to not be the backup. And if they have really no intention of wanting to play him right now, which they have not told us they have no intention, but clearly by their actions and probably by the owner's actions, they have no interest in playing Bryce Young at this point in time. They need to bring somebody else in to be that number 2 and then really to have that overall reset for Bryce and maybe even move off of him at the end of the season or midseason if that's possible. I don't really know what their plan is going to be there. As far as Sunday, it's going to be Dalton. And if he goes down, then we're going to see Bryce Young, and we'll see how that goes for this Panthers team. Because a couple years ago, the Jets actually got to a situation where they had to play Zach Wilson. Last year, they brought in Aaron Rodgers. He gets hurt 4 snaps into the season, and they had to go back to that quarterback that they tried to move off of. Oh, I don't think the Panthers want to put themselves in that situation, so they probably would be wise to go find someone else to be their backup instead of having Bryce Young just one Andy Dalton injury away from being right back out there. And the same frustration we saw on Sunday and the Sunday prior playing out once again.
Now, what if Andy Dalton does get injured in Las Vegas, but hear me out, for a 36-year-old quarterback who hasn't started in a year, isn't very good? Does Dave Canales then declare this like a competition for the next week's game against the Bengals?
I don't think you make this decision unless you're completely done with this quarterback. And that goes back to what I said about I don't imagine the Panthers, after 2 weeks, put all the things that they did this offseason feasibly to help Bryce Young, that they would move off of Bryce Young after these 2 weeks, see Andy Dalton play poorly week 3, and then go back to Bryce Young. I don't see that being the case. This is an organization, in my opinion, that's done. And maybe they also did it because they didn't want to lose their locker room. I brought up the frustration that we saw on the field from Adam Thielen, and you can only continue to go on week in and week out with the quarterback who's playing this poorly and clearly does not have the footwork right, the accuracy, the confidence. I don't think the offensive line's playing poorly. I thought when they at least tried to run the ball yesterday with Chuba Hubbard that they ran the ball well. The receivers seem to be getting open. It doesn't seem to be the kind of issues that we saw last year outside of just the quarterback has not been playing his part. Dave Canales said about Bryce Young had to play his 111th. Through 2 weeks, he has not played that 111th, and I don't think Andy Dalton playing poorly 1 week is going to have them go right back to Bryce Young.
All right, Julian, last week, Derek Brown out for the season. This week, Bryce Young benched after 18 games. Just another manic Monday. Thanks for joining us, and you can find Julian's great work at Locked On Panthers.